colleges are businesses, and they don't want to admit it, but they're a business. And, main rule of business, don't leave money on the table. If you come to me, let's say I'm selling a car and I was planning on selling it for 10 grand, but I somehow through, I don't know what divine inspiration I have, somehow I know you came with 20 grand in your pocket. We both know that price just went up.
This is not a business where you take polls. It's a business where you think. You're not right or wrong because 1,000 people agree with you.
Ben, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So to start off, could you just, for folks who are not familiar, could you walk us through your background? You're president of New St. Andrews College.
Yeah.
But, starting at the beginning of your career, how did you get to that place?
I think college president is not something you can really determine early on. This is what I want to be. It's not something normally, you select for yourself. And in a lot of ways, my wife and I joked about how it felt a little bit like God was drunk driving with my life because of how you do this and then this and then this, and then all of a sudden it all comes together in this way that's like, okay, I get this. This is where I'm supposed to be. I was raised in a Christian family, came up to the University of Idaho in the early 90s, and was definitely not an academic by any means. Was on academic probation at several institutions of higher learning in our great state.
You were an academic, but an academic profession.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So, but it was, first of all, I think becoming serious about my Christian faith during my college years made me become serious about, first of all, Scripture, the Bible, but then it also made me serious about words in general, wanting to actually be somebody who thought clearly, thought precisely, worked hard, was diligent with my mind. And so that led to, my goal was to go into ministry. And so I was studying for pastoral work, but I really was pushing myself on the academic side as I pursued my pastoral work. Learning the Hebrew language was a big part of that, the discipline that it had taken to learn something like Hebrew. I really enjoyed pushing myself like that and what it opened up to me. But what I found was I was going into ministry, but I started teaching part-time at New St. Andrews. And what I found was I was going to ministry because I want to have this kind of impact on people's lives. But what surprised me was how much of a greater impact I was actually having through teaching in the college classroom. There is something about those years, 18 to 22, that are so formative. I think a lot of parents think that their job is to get their kids to the year 18, and then all of the cement will be laid and nothing will change in their life. I've laid the foundation. Now they're just going to go off and get some vocational certification and nothing will change. But that's just, if you ask yourself, ask your parents, ask virtually anybody, the years 18 to 22, were those the non-formative years? Did nothing of, significance happen to your life during that time? And it's obvious these are tremendously formative years, and the chance to meet young men and women in the classroom where you're tackling difficult questions, but doing it for NSA inside this Christian context and this worldview that's bringing real answers. I found that to be just incredible. And even though I wanted to do ministry, I was doing more ministry in the classroom. So I really kind of turned and said, I'm going to go all in on being an academic. That's when I had gotten a master's in English literature, which was kind of a credential because it was a graduate degree, but it wasn't really the field that I wanted to work in. So I decided if I wanted to be serious about higher ed, I needed to get the degree that would serve what I wanted to teach. So that's when really just swung for the fence and applied for a master's degree at Oxford. Was accepted to do a 1-year master's in Jewish studies, which I picked because it allowed me to dive deeper into Hebrew while also expanding the context of my study of Hebrew, getting to read rabbinic works, understand the Jewish world. Got to do a really cool course on Josephus, but also spent time in the Psalms, and then was able to do a dissertation on the influence of the rabbinic world on the Protestant Reformation. So, which was also intriguing to me. And then I did that 1 year master's because I really wanted to do the doctorate, but I knew that if I just applied for a doctorate at Oxford, I didn't stand a chance. But I thought I could get in at the master's and then kind of put all my chips on the table that like during that 1 year I would impress the professors enough that I could be accepted for the doctorate. So we sold everything, sold our house, everything. Wow. I had 5 kids, moved to Oxford, and all on this gamble that I could do well enough with this master's to get the doctorate. And it worked. I got the doctorate.
So the strategy was impress the profs enough that they would write you letters of recommendation for the full program.
Exactly, yeah. Because I knew the people who would be reviewing my application for the doctorate would be my teachers for the master's. So I had to have some chance to make a personal connection and win them. And it worked. God was good to us. I got accepted for the doctorate. So we stayed on, did my DPhil, and continued to work on that intersection between the Protestant Reformation and the sort of Jewish sources that had an influence on the Protestant Reformation. A lot of people don't know about. It's kind of an interesting backstory because, when the Reformation hits, Christians have not read their Bible in the Greek or the Hebrew for 1,000 years. And so when they want to go back to the original sources, if you wanted to go learn Hebrew, you literally had to go find a Jewish rabbi to teach you Hebrew. And so you got like 150 year window where Protestant reformers are getting rabbis to teach them to learn Hebrew, either actual live teachers or using rabbinic works to teach them the language. And so there's a stream of influence of medieval rabbinic works influencing the Protestant Reformation. A lot of people don't consider. So that was kind of what I was focused on, which was really interesting. Got that doctorate, came back to Moscow. And at this time, actually, when I returned for a number of years, there was not a position for me to teach at the school that I've been at, which was that was the sort of drunk driving thing where it was like, I got all these credentials to teach.
You're equipped, but there's no opening.
Came back, there was nothing to do. And so I got a job as an executive minister at Christ Church. And then after a few years there, then a position did come open, and then the presidency came open. And that was where all of a sudden, all of it came together. Like having been an executive minister actually taught me about running a team, running an office, running a budget, put me in the pulpit a lot, and college presidents have to go around and preach all the time. It's a big part of your job if you're in a Christian college. And but I also had the academic credentials for the position. And it just kind of all came together, and it was like, okay, now I know why I'm here, what I'm doing, what this is all about.
Yeah.
You were also a Marine, though.
I was, yeah, that's right. Well, you're actually not supposed to say I was. Once a Marine, always a Marine. So yeah,
that's right.
Former Marine. Right out of high school, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I did the reserves because I wanted to not get behind on college.
All I remember is, the reason I remember you're a Marine is because in your Proverbs study when we were in school, you were telling us these stories about going to the gas
chamber.
The gas chamber getting gas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It was, it's funny. I was in the reserves. I enlisted, when I was in high school, went to boot camps. I graduated from high school on a Friday, went to boot camp on Monday morning, and did that straight through. The summer of 1990 is when Saddam Hussein went into Kuwait. And so I was on this special program where you go to boot camp one summer, then you go to college, and the next summer you would go to your specialty school. I was a tanker, so that's what I was waiting for, was to go to tank school. But in between is when my unit got activated to go to the Gulf War. I mentioned earlier that I was not a great student. I was down at Boise State University at this time, flunking all my classes, and my unit gets activated. And so I go to all my professors, say, I I know you'd like to fail me because I'm flunking your class. I show up, I sleep. That's all I do. But you can't because I'm going to defend your freedom and you have to let me go. So I got out all my classes. I showed up reporting in, and because I hadn't been to tank school, I couldn't go with them. So they all took off. They said, as soon as there's a spot at tank school, we'll send you there, and then you can meet us over in Kuwait. And I wait. This is November. I go through December. I get to January, and I don't have a slot. So I re-enrolled in classes. I make it to like February, and once again, I'm flunking every single class, sleeping through everything. And then I got my orders for tank school. So I got to go and say,
Again,
I know you'd like to fail me, but I'm going to defend your freedom, so you can't. So I got out, and I actually got to the airport with orders to go to tank school. And I'm standing there at the ticket counter trying to check in, and my orders were canceled while I was standing there. Because the first Gulf War was over before it started. They were sending people home, pretty quickly. But I got out of those first 2 semesters of not getting kicked out of school. So I actually think that Saddam Hussein saved my academic, career. It didn't start well, but I got enough of a pass early on that I managed to make it to the Oxford doctorate.
So yeah, other than the help of Saddam Hussein, what else took you from being like sort of a dropout, tanker, guy who sleeps in and flunks classes to an academic?
It was that, my time at college was when I became serious about my faith, that I became evangelically serious. Like, I'm a Christian. I want to live like it. And probably the number one sin that I needed to mortify in my life was laziness. I mean, I knew it. I was a lazy person. And I had the academic horsepower. I always knew I could pull it off if I tried, which is why I kept not trying. And so when I started to become serious about my faith, that's when I decided, okay, if I'm going to be a Christian, I have to show up and work hard. And so actually you mentioned my undergraduate degree is secondary education, but my education major, my main subject was chemistry. And the reason was because the chemistry classes were the ones I was failing. And they just kicked my rear end every time. And so when I became serious about, wanting to be a student, I just picked the class that was the hardest. And I just kept taking chemistry classes. I hated chemistry. I know, but I had like this chemistry degree. I didn't enjoy it, but I was majoring in self-discipline. That's really what it was, which really, then when I wanted to tackle something like Hebrew, the discipline I learned through chemistry, when I suddenly hit this subject that I loved, it gave me the power that I needed to actually really truly master it.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like chemistry and Hebrew could be 2 of the most sadistic things to major in.
It was sadistic.
It will turn me from a lazy student into a disciplined one.
Yeah. Okay. So now, president of NSA, you're very embedded in the higher education space and have been for many years. What do you see as sort of the landscape of higher education in the U.S. at this point?
It's a really interesting moment. I mean, I think just nationally, it's a really interesting moment. It's interesting because there's so much upheaval. And I think a lot of people incapable of coming to grips with what's going on. They're not ready to there are certain questions being asked of higher education that higher education in general is not willing to dignify with an answer, or they don't want to admit that that's what's going on. I mean, I think one of the there are a few big questions. There are some serious questions about the financial model. I think student loan forgiveness is making people say, what is going on here? But I think even deeper is this question of what is the point of a college degree? What is the point of higher education? Colleges have wanted to argue that the college degree is a necessary certification that you must have in order to successfully enter the job force. The problem is that is so falsifiable. We see plenty of people getting great work without that certificate, as well as the fact that once you have entered the workforce with that certificate, you can move laterally very quickly without re-entering, your undergraduate degree. And you start to realize that vocational skills are are not passed on as efficiently as colleges want to think that they're done by these course systems.
And at the price that they're...
What's that?
And at the price.
Especially at the price. And I think those two questions are actually really related because if you go to your typical college, particularly the private college world, which is where we're a private college, you have this really inflated tuition, $30,000 to $50,000 annually just for tuition, and you got room and board on top of that. You have an 18-year-old kid come in, and you're going to tell him, okay, you have to pay, say, $40,000 annually for the next 4 years in order to get this certificate. And how is that sale going to happen? You're a recruiter. How do you convince an 18-year-old to do this? Because the only way most of them are going to afford it is by taking out the student loans. They're going to max out their student loans. So this kid is going to be $160,000 to $200,000 in debt after 4 years to get this certificate. And student loan debt is really interesting because think of any other form of debt. How do you qualify for a mortgage, for a car loan, whatever? You have to show your ability to pay it off. With a student loan, the way you qualify for a student loan is demonstrating that you have no capacity to pay for this. Like it's the most absurd kind of debt out there that you show, I have no capacity here. Okay. Oh, you qualify, $200,000, you're in. That makes no sense. So how can you make that sale make sense? Well, what you do is you have to embrace this mythology that these certificates equal these jobs. And once you can do that, then this certificate now equals a certain revenue stream. So you go to the recruiter's office and they're going to say, oh, you want to be an accountant. Here's what you'll make. Here's your annual income. Or you're going to be an electrical engineer. Okay, here's what you're going to make. Then once you see that return on your investment, the ROI, now, this makes sense. This is an investment to get me to that revenue stream. Yes. What they don't tell you is that you have a less than 70% chance of actually graduating, right? So imagine going and taking out
graduating period.
Period. Yeah. Period.
Unless getting the job.
Yeah. And some schools, their degree completion rate is under 20%.
Wow.
Okay. So imagine going and taking out, say, a $500,000 mortgage on a home with a less than 70% chance that you'll get the home, right? You'll still have the debt, but it's maybe a 70% chance you'll get the home.
Right.
And then, okay, that's just your likelihood of getting a degree. The likelihood of you getting the degree that you started with, okay, is even less than that. So 70% chance that you'll get a home, maybe a 45 to 50% chance that it's the home that you think you're buying. It might be a degree in
people switch majors.
Yeah, you might end up with a degree in film study. You started as an electrical engineer, turned out math is really hard. You finish as a business major. That's a really common pivot. And certain degrees, particularly the engineering degrees, have a really high attrition rate. You still get a degree, but it's not the one you thought. So it's not the revenue stream that you thought you were investing in. And then go a little bit further. Let's go 5 years into your career. Are you still in the job that you majored in? Okay. Now we're down. Well, I think we're probably under 30% now at this point. So that little moment in the recruiter's office is this total con. And I think people are starting to see that more and more. And they're asking higher education, what is your point? If it's just job certification, you don't do a good job of it. I mean, I consistently speak to CEOs who are saying people are coming supposedly qualified for this job. They have no clue. I'm starting at the beginning and having to teach them all the stuff. I can do a better job of teaching them these work skills than these schools do. Okay. So what is the point of this degree? And then why is it so absurdly expensive? And then you add onto it bigger, deeper worldview questions where there's a deep indoctrination into a particular leftist ideology that's happening across the board at our college campuses, including supposedly conservative Christian private schools. And then you wonder, why are we doing this? So those are a series of questions that I think colleges are not ready to answer. because their whole business model is built on these things just being presupposed. And if you question those things, they're not sure what they have to deliver anymore.
So you've sort of alluded to, that's a great overview of the state of higher ed, but you've, by describing that, you're alluding to distinctives of NSA. I think a lot of people listening to this will know about New St. Andrews, but for those that don't, how is New St. Andrews different, New St. Andrews College different from what you've described? What is your product?
Yeah.
How do you guys structure it?
I'm really blessed to be in the position that I'm in because I got this job in 2015. The school was founded in 1994 by a couple of men who had some very important distinctives that they baked into the school. So, and those distinctives just happen to be extremely critical for the moment that we're in. So I'm very blessed to like drop into a job where like I have the answer because of what I was given. But I think some of the distinctives of NSA, one distinctive, if you're familiar with the broader K-12 classical Christian education movement, started in Moscow here in 1980 with the founding of Logos School, and now has hundreds of thousands of students in classical education of one sort or another in the K-12 years across the U.S. That whole movement then, NSA was started in 1994 as a next step for that movement. So there is a distinctive pedagogy and worldview that the school has. And one of the ways you see it show up at NSA is we do not offer vocationally specific degrees. We offer one undergraduate degree in liberal arts. We have a couple of graduate degrees that are different, but we have one undergraduate degree that is a generalist degree. It's not specialized and it's not professionalized. We're not telling you this is the certificate to get that job. What we have is one broad undergraduate degree, and we have a strong conviction that our job is to teach the whole person, teach you to be educated in the classical sense, which means you're the fruit of that liberal arts tradition, these classical disciplines that teach the mind how to think and to communicate, how to argue, how to persuade, how to be creative. And we mix in with that, the ability to work independently, to be able to receive a big assignment, be told, go figure it out, come back with the answer. And when you come back, I'm going to argue with you and I'm going to make it uncomfortable. And when a student is the fruit of that over 4 years, I find that graduates with that kind of education are far more prepared to be adaptive to the kind of workforce that we have now. How do you prepare vocational certification for the careers that don't even exist yet, but will in 2 years? Because they pop up like that, right? You can't build certification for that fast enough. What you can build, though, are mobile, agile minds who are ready to be adaptable to the kinds of things that the workforce is creating. I like seeing graduates who are capable of seeing this is a moment to be in real estate. I will do real estate. And then be able to say, this is not a moment to be in real estate. I will do finance. I will, and to be able to pivot like that, I think that's a far more helpful product. And I find, going back to some of the earlier conversations, when I talk to CEOs, they will say, I can teach you the vocational skills of my job, but what I need is somebody who knows how to think, how to work, somebody who can do, there's a low bar now, like, can you show up sober and not intending to embezzle?
Yes.
There you go.
There's like, just like if you had a steady pipeline of young professionals who had just a few of those skills, right? Some basic low bar moral qualifications and a general intellect and an adaptability and a creativity. If you had a steady pipeline of that, I know a lot of CEOs would say, that is all I need to conquer the world. And so that's what we're trying to produce with that liberal arts curriculum. Some of the other distinctives of NSA, we from the beginning have said no federal money. So no to student loans, no to Pell Grants, or I should say the federally subsidized student loans. No Pell Grants, nothing that the federal government has its fingers in. I think that the federal money has been a big part of the inflation of tuition. Colleges are businesses, and they don't want to admit it, but they're a business. And, main rule of business, don't leave money on the table. If you come to me, let's say I'm selling a car and I was planning on selling it for 10 grand, but I somehow through, I don't know what divine inspiration I have, but somehow I know you came with 20 grand in your pocket. We both know that price just went up. Yeah, because I'm not going to leave money on the table. You come to bargain with me for tuition, and I can, through your financial aid form, know your capacity and know what the federal government will fund you. Right. Yeah, because I can find all of that. Right. Okay, I'm going to put my tuition as high as I can so I can capture all of that money because I'm not going to leave money on the table. Every time the federal government raises their subsidy of higher education, you will see tuition go ratcheting up. I think it was William Bennett under Secretary of Education under Reagan, who's known for the Bennett hypothesis, which is basically every time the government increases money in funding to higher education, you will see tuition go up to capture that money. So it's so weird where we say we're trying to make education affordable and available to everyone by having more federal money go into education. All you're doing is raising the money. And then as a business, when you have, you're removing higher education from the price signals of the free market when you do that. So that's why you have so much administrative bloat in these schools, so many of these virtue signaling offices that add nothing to the actual education and are part of that indoctrination I was describing earlier. That's all made possible by this bloated, federal money that is coming in. And so I think us saying we're not going to be a part of that means we are tuned to the price signals of the free market. We've got to compete. Our degree has to deliver, the value that is right with our tuition, and it keeps us lean and mean in our administrative bloat. So that's one piece of it. The other is it keeps us from having to answer to the whims of the federal government. A lot of the ideology that you're seeing on college campuses is imposed upon them via the federal money. If you take that money, you have to have these virtue signals built in to your administration. And we don't want to have to do that. So saying no to the federal money is good for that. And then lastly, because the bulk of the federal money has been through student loans, the subsidized student loans, you see graduates walking out with an absurd amount of debt that they've not thought through clearly. By not taking the federal money, we do help students to stay truer to their own means and not get in over their heads. Yeah. You can't control what people will do with private debt. Like, we don't have any say in that, but we can say this really easy money, this easy debt, we're going to close that door for you. And I think even though that makes things harder, it makes it better for everyone. Yeah. Probably the third distinctive of NSA is that we really have seen over the last 3 years just the explosion of the woke agenda pushed through higher education. This sense of like, if you're going to get a college degree, then you're not going to be able to do it without learning how to use the pronouns, learning how to like guard your speech, learning how to. There's all this all this kind of ridiculous woke agenda that you have to pay homage to in order to get through the system. And that's just a game that we've not played. We're a conservative Christian college, and we've made that clear in our statements on what is a marriage, what is a man, what is a woman, what is life. So there's a number of things like that we've been pretty clear on at a moment where many colleges are way in the other ditch, and then Christian colleges who might share our convictions are very quiet and careful about them. We've been really loud about it, and I think that's caused us to stand out in a pretty significant way.
So what is the ideal graduate for New St. Andrews look like? If the traditional higher ed are pumping out, debt-laden, professionally minded, almost like PSYOP people, because they've been indoctrinated from the start that if they want to get a job, they need to get saddled with that. They have all these assumptions about the work. Yeah. If that's the kind of graduate that's produced in the higher ed mill, what is the ideal graduate look like?
Yeah. I think I would sum it all up under the word free. The ideal graduate would be a free man, a free woman. And I would use that word free really to actually hit each of those three categories I just gave. Free, with regard to the pedagogy and the kind of education they've received. It is a liberal arts education. And that word liberal arts, as you well know, comes from the Latin liber, which is the word for a free man, as opposed to the hireling, as opposed to the serf. The point of a liberal arts education was to create a free man, and it was connected with cultural leadership throughout the whole medieval era. The liberal arts education was the education you gave to the people that you expected to be your cultural leaders, and they were the free people. They were the ones who made decisions. They were the ones who steered culture. So my hope would be it would be a free person. It would not be, people always ask, like, what does an NSA graduate do? Like, are they all accountants? Are they all, in media? Right. And I can't answer that question because they're all over the place. Some run, construction businesses. Some are teachers. Some are pastors. Some are lawyers. Some are homemakers. They're all over the place. Some are in finance. Some are in media. But what I like to think about all of them is that they've been taught to have that kind of free mentality. I know how to think. I know how to integrate the world. I know how to be responsive to what's out there. And I'm not constrained by this notion that I only know how to do this one discipline over here. I can learn that thing, but if I need to, I can pivot and I can advance to the next thing. So free in that sense, free in the financial sense, that they're not loaded with student debt, that they are financially responsible. They are, equipped to be, I think it's interesting how, if you look at the impact of student loan debt on the forming of families, how many people delayed marriage because they got student loan debt? How many people are married but delay having kids because they've got student loan debt? Right. We are killing our ability to build faithful, productive families. It's kind of funny, I think, in a twisted sort of karma, how one of the things that's hitting colleges right now is this birth dearth, the demographic cliff that we've driven off of, where the number of kids coming up has been cut off because we don't have the replacement rate in our reproduction anymore. Who did that? Colleges. Yeah. Right. Colleges encouraged the death of the family. They encouraged women to think that if you don't have a career like a man, you're not really successful. That it's somehow a betrayal of her own mind to become a mom and to raise another generation. Colleges are responsible for that birth dearth, and they're paying for it now. And so I would like to think that we're creating free graduates. One of my favorite statistics about the NSA alumni is that we survey them at 5 and 15 years. And right now, across all of our alumni, about 600 now, we have it's right around a 2% divorce rate. They marry, they have kids, they form faithful families. They understand what a family is, and they're not beholden to this system that I think is destroying America. And then that last one, free. I mean, we're a Christian college. I think ultimate freedom is in Jesus Christ. And I would like to think that our graduate, like the ideal NSA graduate, is a faithful Christian man, faithful Christian woman, living an authentic faith. So free. That's what I think they should be.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, even if you look at, it's the classic example with compound interest. If someone saves even a modest amount in their 20s and have that with compounding interest or the rest of their life versus if they don't save at all, it's a massive difference.
It's huge.
It's a life-changing difference between those two people.
Yeah, learning those disciplines, and it's freedom isn't free. You got to work. You got to work and discipline yourself. You have to hold yourself back. You have to restrict yourself. And when you learn that kind of discipline, the resultant freedom is striking.
Yeah. So what do you think for mainline, like big ed, big higher ed? They've gotten to this point where subsidized by the government, now the actual product they're producing is dramatically more expensive than it should be. But there's just so much momentum. It's this giant machine.
Yeah.
What do you see happening in the future? It's impossible to say, obviously, but how do you think that's going to play out?
What breaks the machine?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And it's hard. It's hard to say. I mean, there are a number of different things, the end of the Department of Education could do do the world a lot of good. To cut off federal funding would force colleges to respond to, the product and the price signals of the free market and all of that. I think that would be a huge thing. It would be to cut off the federal funding. The likelihood of that happening seems quite slim to me. It's really hard to get something like that turned off. I think that we are seeing some real shakeups, and I think the probability at some point that student loan forgiveness goes through will force a reckoning with colleges. Why is there all this bad debt on your product? And it'll be interesting to see what kind of shakeup that has. But given the minds that are leading this conversation, I don't imagine that they will accurately diagnose the problem. And I think it'll probably just launch us into another further cheapening of the college degree. I think one of the things I notice is right now, if you were to step back and really look at it with a critical eye, the average college campus, the freshman and the junior years are what high schools used to cover. So a high school graduate, if you were to graduate now with a high school degree that taught you what a high school diploma used to teach you, you can your first 2 years of college will be remedial. You're not going to learn anything new. It won't be till your junior year that you start actually getting challenged. And this is why you have so many running start, dual enrollment, whatever, to knock out the first 2 years, because it is remedial for over half the students. But colleges have to do it because another half of their students aren't ready for it. The college degree is just becoming increasingly a joke. And I think there just has to be some sort of reckoning for that. I think that in the meantime, like until that reckoning happens, what we really have to think about is we've done, I think, a very good job of building an alternative K-12 pipeline outside of the public school system, both through private Christian schools and through homeschooling. There is a robust, high quality K-12 education available across America. And COVID did a great job of pushing a lot of people to that, helping them see the flaws in what was going on and pushing them out to this network. We built a really fantastic network there. We have done almost nothing at the college level. And I think that's the next thing is that we need, I really believe in the NSA product. I think we've done an amazing job, but we need 15 to 20 NSAs across America. The problem is that I don't think most people know what it takes to actually start a college. So I see a lot of people trying to start them, but they've not done the work. They don't understand what an undertaking it is. And you have people who have successfully started K-12 schools thinking that starting a college will be the same thing. And it is a totally different thing. And we don't understand how significant and how heavy of a lift it is. And so we have to figure out how to start the colleges and start an alternative education pipeline that goes not just K-12, but all the way through the BA. And when we can build that, it won't matter what's going on with the other colleges.
New Sanders is busy doing a lot of things, but are there any plans for you guys to help kind of at least create blueprints for other folks to be able to start colleges?
I would love to do that. And the board and I talk about this all the time because I get so many requests. I mean, literally at least get a couple a month of like, hey, we're starting a new college. I just got a letter yesterday.
Really?
We're starting a new college. Can you, so it's all over. And there's a question of, what could we do to help with that? And there's two things we're kind of high centered on. One is that NSA isn't there yet. We're in a growth mode, and we've got to get a lot further before we're at a capacity where we can kind of overflow like that. Yeah. And I don't know how long that takes, but we're not there yet. And the second is every time I get somebody who's wanting to start a college, I'll go and start to try to spend some, put work into it. And what I find is they aren't ready to actually deliver at this level. And they don't want to put into it what it would take to deliver this level. Yeah. And I don't want to put my effort into something that just further cheapens what this is supposed to be.
Right.
I think this idea of what a college education really should be and what it can do, very few people have a real conception of that. You'll meet with somebody who wants to start a Christian college, but what they want is they want a, that cheapened college degree. They want to replicate that, or that vocational certification. They want to replicate that. And I'm not interested in putting a lot of effort that I would have to distract from building this into helping with that. So my hope is we get NSA to the place where it can really stand as a model and then have the clout to be able to say, if you want to step up here, we want to help, but you have to be really ready to step up to here.
Yeah, that's on that level. I'm curious. So we've talked about the students and the structure of the education at New St. Andrews, but from an institutional faithfulness perspective, one of the things that as a graduate and somebody who's been connected to New St. Andrews for over 10 years now, always surprises me in a good way, given the state of culture, is just how faithful the faculty, the institution itself, regardless of students, has been able to remain for the last, especially over the last 5-10 years, where other Christian schools or conservative schools, whether it's through federal funding or otherwise, capitulate in different ways. What are you guys doing? What are you doing internally with your team, with the faculty? If you're thinking about this as a business, you're the CEO, you're the president. Yeah. How do you keep the guys on the ship all aligned, all mission oriented, and not start, having mutinies or traitors within?
I look forward to the day when I have enough to give there that I can write the book, because it's certainly a book that needs to be written, and I don't know that I have it yet. But there are. I've been blessed to be the successor to some really wise men in what they put together. And I'm still picking up on things like, okay, now I get why we do that. But I would say, one of the things I notice is when you have a very distinctive vision and then you go to make new hires, you will sell people on this vision. You'll say, this is our vision. And you get people who sit there and they nod and they say yes. And the whole time they're thinking, well, I'll say this to get the job. And then the day after you hire them, they begin passively subverting everything that you're doing.
Undermining.
Exactly. And it's, some people are dishonest, deceptive, and all of that. But a lot of people, it's not a dishonesty or a deception. They don't even see themselves doing it. They just see as like, well, this is apparently the flag I need to salute here, so I salute, but I don't really, and that they don't plan on subverting it, but it just starts coming out. Yeah. I think you have to be able to sniff that out and act. You do. One of the things I mentioned was during this 2020 moment when it's like 2020 is the year America stepped on a rake, right? Just like, gosh, what is happening? And during that moment, I really saw we all saw America falling apart. But one of the things I noticed was how complicit all of America's colleges were in this moment that we were having. Like, this was something that colleges were maybe not the sole cause of, but we were colleges were complicit. And even conservative Christian colleges were being complicit in this. And
what do you mean by complicit? Complicit by just shutting down, then the mimetic sort of wave spreads. So if they're shutting down, we got to shut down.
Well, even
or producing the graduates that would be okay with
all of the above. I mean, even prior to the COVID moment, you had the George Floyd moment, you had social justice, and you had colleges were a big part of that whole social justice movement. Yeah, that was in the curriculum. It was in all the virtue signaling offices on the college campuses. That was something colleges were pushing, and conservative Christian colleges jumped in and saluted that flag. They did all the virtue signaling in order to be kind of, hip and a part of the moment, be culturally relevant. And then we went straight from that into COVID, and we all, when I say we, I just mean colleges in general, went straight into the lockdowns and all of that business. And so I saw a moment where, I don't know, it's kind of like you see the football field and you see everybody go this side, and there's a huge wide open channel right here. And so we just steered as hard as we could into that moment and put the pedal to the metal. We did not embrace the woke agenda. One of the things that outraged everyone came out of our marketing team was the video, the infamous bathroom ad. It was just it was a public restroom just right outside of our building. 2 NSA students, a guy and a girl, are walking up, and then the guy goes to the guy's bathroom, the girl goes to the girl's room, and then just said something like, NSA going against the flow, and then you hear the toilet flush. But it was just, we know what a man is, we know what a woman is. Freaked everyone out. I mean, I got a phone call from the mayor who was upset, and we got denounced by everyone. But 2 things. First of all, there was a huge market of people looking for a college that would not scared to say the most basic truth and to say it in the microphone. And our enrollment spiked, and it hasn't gone down since. But the other thing it did was it was really great for faculty and staff. Like, if you want to work here, you can't be scared to say into the microphone that boys shouldn't go into the girls' restroom. Like, it's such a basic biological fact, and we can't be scared to say that. That's not something that needs to be carefully nuanced or whatever. It's just like, if you can't get 2 + 2 = 4, then you ought not to be doing calculus, right? And if you can't get this cultural moment right, then everything else that's in your curriculum is worthless. So leaning into that moment was, I think, really important. We did it with the ad campaign. Another thing, I think I don't know of another college campus in America that has made it through the last 4 years without requiring masks or vaccines. We never required a mask. We never required a vaccine. We could see what was going on and we wouldn't do it. And that was tense. I mean, it's funny now because everybody is now starting to admit, okay, maybe we overreacted, but they're acting as if it's something that could only be seen in hindsight.
Did you see the Atlantic article, the pandemic amnesty, calling for pandemic amnesty? It was basically forget it. Like, we screwed up, but it's better if we just sweep it under the rug than deal with the.
They all want to act like it's something that in hindsight can be seen, but only in hindsight.
Right.
It was flaming obvious at the time, and if you couldn't see it, then you ought not to be a leader, because it was obvious, and we wouldn't do it. And I think that was really important, because I think it helped people to see what our school was about. But I also think it was really important for our faculty and staff. It's a tense moment in the town. People knew we weren't masking, and you had to have a spine to say, I work there, I'm going to go there. And I think that that's good, because it shakes loose that person that's like, I'm just saying this to get the job. Like, you don't keep the job when it's going to cost you like that. So I think it's really good. I also thought that moment was incredibly good for our students. I think that 2020 was the year that an entire generation of America got quitting into their DNA, and that's going to stay in their DNA for life. They did something deeply damaging to those students. But 2020 was the year NSA students got a very different thing into their DNA, which is, I see this moment, I will be courageous, and I'm gonna make this call. And even though they're following an institution in the moment, it helped them to make a really bold decision that's going to be in their DNA for life. You know, they're going to remember that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when another challenging situation faces them, they know how to handle this. So I think it was really good for us.
So you're talking about faithfulness in the short term in terms of hiring faculty, how the college acts. When you think, or how much do you think about long term? So like NSA is based on a lot of practices from early Oxford, Harvard, all those that have obviously eventually gone downhill.
Yeah.
How do you think about like 200 years from now? Is NSA sort of like a disposable institution in terms that we plan for it to fall away, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, thinking about long-term faithfulness of institutions is really interesting. I think, my brother-in-law, Nate Wilson, he was speaking at a conference a while ago, and I remember he had this really strong exhortation of like, your institutions are like battleships. You've got to build them, but then you've got to risk them. You got to send them out and engage them with the enemy, and some of them will go down. And so I don't want to pretend like we're doing this thing that can't ever be corrupted or twisted. But I don't want that possibility that it could fall at some point to scare me from doing all that I can to build something awesome now. So I'm building battleships. I don't want to send them out and risk them. That said, I do think that American evangelical Christians are too pessimistic about institutions. This is where your eschatology, I think, really matters. American evangelicals have believed that the world is about to end for the last, for as long as I've been alive. I grew up, I was born in 1972. For as long as I've been alive, as a kid, I was taught at any moment we're all going to get raptured. At any moment the Russians invade. At any moment, and so you don't put time into building these things because it's all just going to burn. And I think that has crippled Christians in having built a discipline for understanding how to lead an institution over a long period of time. We do fine inside of other people's secular institutions where they supply the vision, but Christians don't have a vision for how to build an institution and to preserve it over generations. And the thing is, Christians think that it's because of their Christianity because I believe the world's about to end. But it's not true. If you look at the history of the church, the medieval church could go hundreds of years, 1,000 years, preserving and passing on without, and I think there were problems. Obviously, I'm a Protestant. I believe we needed the Reformation. There are problems, but none of them had this thought that like everything I'm building is just going to be lost in the next 3 to 5 years. They could build something with a long-term vision. And I think that that's something that we really need to, something we need to get better at, and learning to have this confidence that I can build an institution, I can raise up a generation of men, I can hand it off to them, and I can expect that they will take it and they will make it even better than what I did. I see a lot of other worldviews do this well. It's something that I think particularly distinctively American evangelical Christians don't do, and we need to figure that out.
So back to education and you brought up the men and women. Understanding that men are men and women are women. What do you see as this is sort of a question I've had as a graduate from Rick Sanders. Yeah. What do you see as you have men in the student body, you have women in the student body, but generally the education is pretty structured the same for both. Yeah. Where do you see some distinctives for each sex as they, as you look to equip them with a broad general base, but also individually for their vocations and their callings?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and something that we put a lot of time thinking about. It's something my wife has written on quite a lot. And my wife was she was the first student in 1980 when Logos School was started. So when classical Christian education started, she was in that 1980 kindergarten class. She was in that first freshman year of New St. Andrews when it started in 1994. And she has no interest in a vocational career. Her desire is to be a faithful wife and mom. She's held down jobs, but almost all of it was in service of her home. So when my kids were all at school, she went and taught. My kids were all at NSA. She had part-time jobs around NSA, helping with different things. But the idea was she wanted to take that education and deploy it as a faithful wife and mom. And I do think one of the things that the conservative movement has not done well is understanding the glory of that position, a wife and a mom. The feminist world has said, if you get an education, it is wasted at home. You need to go get a career. Otherwise, your mind is not truly being engaged.
And if you have the debt, then you're going to.
Yeah, well, exactly.
I never have to.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and that's what the student loan debt obligates them to. Yeah. But then what the problem has been that when the conservative world, many of the conservatives have adopted the premises of the feminists, which is that the life of the homemaker is a life that does not engage the mind. They have embraced that and said, therefore, don't educate your daughters. I want to destroy that position. I think I want our graduates, especially I want our female graduates to aspire to be wives and mothers. That is what God has uniquely built them for, and I think they should aspire to that. But I believe it's a noble calling and one that deserves a rigorous education. And I see the fruit of it in my home, where the life of the mind applied to the life of the home produces this really amazing place inside of which my kids can grow up and understand the beauty of the world that God has made for them and what God has called them to. And a lot of that is because my wife is intelligent. She's educated, capable of walking them through a story, talking about songs with them, getting them to school, helping them with their homework, also giving them an amazing meal, beautiful home, all of that because she's educated. So our goal would be for our undergraduate women to receive the same education as men, but to use that, deploy it in a different way, glorifying this office of a woman. Is it Grace Kelly who's famous for saying, somebody who's complimenting, I think, Fred Astaire for how amazing he was in his dancing. And she said, yeah, but I do all of it except for backwards and in heels. And there is this, I think, distinct role that women have of taking what is happening and then translating it, converting it, and making it be complementary too. There's a translation that has to happen there. And that's something I see in the community around NSA is helping these young women translate that, understand how I take this education, but deploy it not in this way like unless I have this career equal to a man, I'm not his equal, but to deploy it instead is just striving to be a wife and a homemaker.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we're coming to the end of our time here, but as we wrap up, you think about what's next for NSA, what's on the roadmap, and what do you see as kind of the opportunity of this time that we're in right now?
I think we have a distinct pedagogy. I think that there's our product. I'm very committed to, and I'm a strong believer in. I think that we operationally need to build and grow. My goal is, our enrollment right now is just under 300 in the undergraduate. My goal is for that to be at 600. And there are a number of things, both in terms of facilities and a whole host of other things that need to happen in order to get there. So I've got a 10-year road in front of me of raising capital, achieving institutional excellence, continuing to cultivate the right faculty, operationally get everything in the right place. My goal would be to have a premier liberal arts college in the Northwest, a premier Christian liberal arts college that is recognized and known for graduating those leaders who shape culture, but are faithful, distinctive Christians and serve Christ in all things. So that's my commitment, is to get us into that position. I think that in 2020, we got people's attention, but that was a foot in the door, and we've got to go a lot further until we have this established position of like, oh, New St. Andrews, that's that college. We know what they're about. We know what they produce. I want to get there over the next 10 years. And then I think from there, seeing other schools like NSA start. Last month, my wife and I spent a week in Lusaka, Zambia in Africa, and spent a time with African Christian University there, where they're doing something very unique and very like what NSA is doing. And we're trying to spend some time with them to help support that mission going, because that's a group that gets it. We've got one of their guys staying with us right now as we kind of show them land. So I think as we start to see the schools like, oh, okay, that one gets it, I want to help grow those schools. I don't fear competition from schools that are like NSA, because I think that there's so few that if we get it, if we got 10 to 15 to 20 schools like that, the rising tide would float all the boats. If we had a bunch of those schools, NSA would have more students, not less, because more people would see, oh, this is that education.
What you don't want is students going to Christian universities.
Right. Yeah.
Thinking maybe naively so, oh, this is a Christian school, I'm good. Or, guys that, gals would have been a great fit for New St. Andrews who think it's the same thing.
Yeah. Exactly. We have plenty of students. There's more than enough students to go around. What we don't have is a distinctive class of schools, and we need to build that brand.
Yeah. So if people want to learn more or get involved, where should they go?
nsa.edu is the webpage. You can also, I would look us up on Facebook and Twitter. There's a weekly newsletter that goes out that walks people through what's going on. That's something definitely to sign up for if you want to hear more about our distinctives. On our blog, if you go to the webpage on our blog, I'm doing a series that comes out once every 1 or 2 weeks, a video series on higher education. And a lot of the critiques that I've been giving you here are all I'm just ripping off of my comments in those blogs, and we'll keep this up over the next 1 to 2 years. We're trying to put together basically a full, essentially a book on the state of higher education and what needs to be done about it.
Okay, awesome. We'll put that in the show notes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Ben, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Per dimostrare che 2 più 2 fa 4.